Welcome to Clinical Trialblazers, a podcast by Biotech, where we dive deep into the journeys of industry leaders shaping clinical research and biotech innovation. I am your host, Alberto Grignolo. This season on Clinical Trialblazers, I spoke with some truly incredible leaders in our biotech world. I hope you'll check out our earlier episodes because our guests were so generous in sharing what they've learned throughout their careers. And today, it's our season finale, so we're bringing you some of our favorite moments from this series. You can think of today's episode as a toolkit full of savvy tips and practical advice for anyone looking to grow as a leader in biotech. Let's get into it. We kicked off our series with Michael Bailey, President and CEO of Aveo Oncology, a company that develops targeted cancer therapies. I asked Michael how he handles the inevitable challenges that crop up in his work and what keeps him pushing through. Have you ever felt that the world or the circumstances were absolutely stacked against you? If so, how did you stay motivated?
It's a real privilege to work in this industry. I mean, so on the worst days, I'd rather be doing this job than some other more challenging jobs in our kind of ecosystem. With that said, I've faced my share of challenge. And the thing that really gets me out of bed is really, again, going back to that mission focus or the patience. When I took the job as CEO, I said, "Oh, this is wonderful. I can actually, drive to getting this study done for the patients we serve. But on top of that, wow, great opportunity. First time CEO. That's kind of rare air. And then, if we're successful, there's some certain financial rewards that could come from it." Well, I will tell you that there was more than a handful of days where you got up and you said, "I have ruined my career and I am certainly not going to make any money. But I have to get out of bed today because the patients really depend on it and we're doing something really important." So those are the kind of things I would say, the key things to stay motivated. If you ever hire someone and they don't mention in your discussion with them in an interview that a reason to want to be at your company is to help patients, then they're probably, certainly here at Aveo, they're probably not going to fit in well. And like I said, this is a tough business. Unprecedented failure rates. So you gotta have a higher calling.
Leadership. It's a topic we came back to throughout the series, and for good reason. Everyone I've had the pleasure of speaking with on Clinical Trialblazers is a leader in their own right. So what does it take to be an effective captain of the ship? It's something I explored with each of our guests, including Robert Blum, President and CEO of Cytokinetics. Can we do a little self-reflection? You have grown as a leader to the highest levels in the industry. So what type of leader are you? How do you inspire the people you work with?
I think it starts with humility and values. I do believe that as I've matured as a leader and as our company has perhaps evolved alongside, we've taken the definition of servant-based leadership to new levels. I hopefully am a leader that is an exemplar of what it means to be team-oriented, collaborative, and inspirational, empowering of others to do what they know how to do best, and demonstrating that we across the organization can be transparent. It's important that we are all accessing information to be enabling of us to do what we do at our company. So we don't use information as a superpower segregated to some and not to others. Ours is an organization, and hopefully I, as a leader and am an example of this, who can be enabling with the sharing of information and decision-making authority to let people do what they know how best to do. And in that way, we're all rowing in the same direction. Where I think I still can do more and better as a leader is to be inviting of more criticality of thought, more dynamic tension, in order to be enabling of us to always be at our very best, challenging assumptions, for instance. As a younger company, I think we did that quite well. Certainly that's something scientists do every single day.
That's right.
But as we've become a more mature organization, it's incumbent upon us to be reminded of that being a necessity, an essential to doing the right things all the time and being the best organization we can be.
Throughout the series, we talked about different kinds of leaders in biotech, whether as entrepreneurs, executives, or investors. When I spoke with Carrie Brady, a biotech founder and executive who currently serves as the chair of the board for Neurocentrics Pharma, we got into yet another way to lead. You've worked with a lot of companies in very senior roles, and you've dealt with boards of directors, and you are a member of several. What is your personal view on being a member of a board of directors? What would you say to someone who aspires to be a member of one board or several boards for that matter?
Being on the board of directors is both an honor and a privilege, and it's a big responsibility within that. And, coming to it with the view that, you're doing this as a service, I think is important for your mindset. Fiduciary duty, there are legal ramifications with that, and you do play a very important role in the company. My very first board, I was still CEO of Ocuterra Therapeutics when I was invited to join the board. And, I obviously got permission to do that. What I found is being a board member made me a much better CEO with my board because you can see it from the board members' point of view. They're not living the company every day. You've got to make sure you provide appropriate context, that you really use your board appropriately, get their input into helping make some of the really difficult decisions. I think the ideal is, a CEO and his team or her team have, done the required work to come up with proposed way forward. And then you get the board to pressure test with you. Are we missing something here? This is the way we think we should be going. Help us decide, on this. In contrast, it's not a good idea to go to the board and say, look, we've got this big problem. What do you think we should do? But give them something to react to. I'd say for people looking or wanting to get on boards is to, first of all, again, your why. Why do you want to be on a board? What do you feel it is that you have in your experience and skill set that can help a company going forward, and to be on their board? The second thing is realize that this takes a long time. The process, you don't just, it's not like job hunting. You think, hopefully in a couple of months, 6 months, if I'm really focused on it, I'll get a job. Board, it can take a very long time. And in fact, it's actually happening now in your career. 2 of my board roles came to me organically from people I had worked with before. Only one of them came through a headhunter. And most of the ones I'm getting approached now are people who know me and have worked with me in the past. So remember, as you are going through your career, and you're building up a network of people who, could be potential contacts to boards going forward.
In episode 4, I spoke with Dr. Sam Blackman, co-founder and former chief medical officer of Day One Biopharmaceuticals. Sam is a true Renaissance man. He's a scientist, a drug developer, an entrepreneur, and he's also a writer and award-winning storyteller who has performed at the Moth. During our conversation, Sam told us about the importance of presenting a clear story when you're raising capital. As he explained it, when it comes to attracting investors, nothing beats compelling communication. Sam, you are a successful scientist, a successful drug developer, a successful entrepreneur. Not only that, but you're also a great and successful storyteller, an award-winning storyteller. You performed at the Moth, the live storytelling competition. You won awards for the work. So let me ask you about storytelling. Has your ability to be such a good storyteller influenced your ability to communicate science, inspire teams, drive innovation, and whatever else?
If I was to provide advice to people going into this field, or particularly entrepreneurs or executives in biotech, especially at times when competition for dollars is very, very high, and there's a wealth of new things for people to invest in every day, it's not just how good can your science be, but how effectively can you communicate it and make it into something that is captivating to people. They want to know how the story is going to unfold.
That sounds very powerful. I suppose you applied it at day one in the other companies to motivate the staff writ large to care about what they were doing, what you all were doing together, and to want to know how is this going to end?
Without a doubt. And I think that this is another opportunity for people to, in leadership positions, in addition to trying to tell compelling stories, the other thing that was really of help for me at day one is, the fact that I did take care of patients for a number of years. And by describing what I saw, what I felt, what it meant to me, to try to take people who were regulatory people or finance people or clinops people or, translational scientists, and through words, carry them with me into a room where I'm sitting with a family and I'm having a day one talk. By telling them those stories and getting them to feel what I felt so many years ago, right? That is a profoundly motivating tool when you're trying to lead a team into action or to work really, really, really hard. When you make it real for people, when through words or through having patients show up, it turbocharges people's motivation to do more, to do better, to go as hard and fast as they can towards getting to the goal line.
One of my favorite things to ask biotech leaders about is their successes and challenges. In other words, the highest highs and lowest lows of their careers. In episode 5, Dr. Ross Breckenridge, CEO of Arjuna Therapeutics, made the case that there's real value in the inevitable disappointments that are part of drug development. We all know that clinical development of a new drug, a new therapeutic, is always a roller coaster. So what have been your highest highs and most difficult lows so far in your career journey as a drug developer?
Yeah, I think, I have to say that I get high when anything works, because in research, especially in clinical research, it's so difficult to get anything to work. When anything works, it is absolutely wonderful. And as you get older, you mentally, you sort of lower the peaks and raise the troughs. Otherwise, you would go mad. Nothing is ever as bad as it looks or as good as it seems. So it's the way to survive this crazy environment. But at the same time, the highs and the lows are what gets you addicted, and one without the other is meaningless. If you're talking about disappointments, the major disappointments that I've had haven't been to do with biology, because biology is biology and clinical trials are clinical trials. But the thing that you can alter is the way that people react when things go wrong. And this fundamentally comes down to who are the people you want to surround yourself with when you found a company, because these are the guys who are going to be in the foxhole with you. And I think that's the real thought experiment. Who do I want around me when things go wrong? You need people around you who aren't going to panic, because as you very well know, Alberto, there's 100% chance of things not working when you're doing biotech at some point. And
maybe 98%. Come on, we got to have a 2% of optimism in there somewhere.
At some point, not everything works all the time. And what you want is to be in a position where this doesn't destabilize things.
I especially enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Antti Vuolanto, CEO of Herantis Pharma, a Finnish biotech working on the development of a therapy for Parkinson's disease. Antti and I discussed the importance of mentorship and the challenges of drug development, and he was generous enough to share some advice for the next generation of biotech leaders. What advice would you give to young scientists or young entrepreneurs hoping to bring a first-in-class therapy to the market? We all know that's not easy. So what advice would you give to the younger selves?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. Expose yourself to as many professionals as you can and listen. Don't believe in everything, but listen and try to understand the other party's angle, where they come from, why they give you a certain message. And then you just need to make your own path and do things in your own way. but you need to remember that there are some general guidelines related to regulatory processes and financing and stuff. So it's also good to really carefully listen about the experiences of the others, but don't believe everything. And of course, world is changing. So you don't necessarily hear today's news from old guys who have done something 10 or 20 years ago.
In episode 7, I spoke with Laila Bibi, a partner at Goldman Sachs who runs their healthcare equity capital markets business. I found it especially helpful to hear from someone who is both a financial expert and has a deep understanding of biotech market trends. It's a competitive funding environment, I don't have to tell you that. So what recommendations do you have for biotech companies to maximize their potential of attracting investments?
It really comes down to identifying and articulating the differentiated clinical proposition that you as an organization are navigating. And I think the ability to continuously develop new therapies for existing conditions continues to be really important. The ability to exhibit a scientific path to a first-in-class medicine for a disease that has no treatment is hugely important societally, but also as we think about our industry. And so I do think, for companies that are thinking through investments at different cycles, it's really articulating quite clearly what is the value proposition, what is the science behind the strategy, understanding that you need to align a set of stakeholders with that vision. Biotech is an industry of duration. You need to have investors that at various points are aligned with the duration of the clinical outcomes that you are solving for, and that you have a funding base that allows you to get to the next set of inflection points, whether that be regulatory, whether it be clinical, whether it be commercial, that allow you to then generate a return on that investment. And having a team in place that is deep and specialized in their domains is important. I think a huge part, and I'm sure we'll talk to it around how do you think about the importance of leadership in these organizations. I think there's the statistic, there's over 1,000 private companies today in biotech. And leadership does become a really important part. Trust
is a key part of any strong relationship, and that includes relationships with investors. This is something I spoke about with Miquel Vila-Perelló, a researcher turned co-founder and CEO of Splice Bio, a gene therapy company based in Barcelona. Let's talk a little about money. You were, of course, in academic research, which depends very heavily on grants. And so you have to apply for grants and obtain them and defend your proposals. In biotech, you have to get investors to invest in your company. Splice Bio recently secured $135 million in Series B funding, a very substantial amount. So what have you learned in this process? How would you compare that experience with trying to get grants funded, Rockefeller or Princeton? And what are your 2-3 major takeaways from your experience with biotech investors compared to grant funding agencies in academia?
One is how important it is to build trust with these investors. The best way to do that is being transparent and really understanding that at the end of the day will end up forming a partnership with these investors. The investors, if they make the decision to invest, they will be part of the company. You'll need to work very closely with them. And so to do that, really, trust is very important. Trust from both ends. So, through the fundraising process, hopefully you can build that trust. And obviously that's something that it's not present at all in grant funding, right? I mean, you don't need to build any sort of trust with a funding agency. You just submit your grant, and sort of trust is kind of a given. Right here, you do need to work towards building that trust. Maybe a final takeaway, maybe more on the personal level, is that obviously these processes are extremely stressful, and you need to find a way to manage that stress.
Our final guest of the year was Gita Vemuri, founder and managing partner of Agent Capital, a healthcare-focused venture firm. I wanted to know what, in Gita's eyes, is the recipe for success for biotech CEOs. Are there any common traits that you've seen in successful CEOs or clinical programs that resonate the most with investors like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's the vision. I can use a cliche, which is, true, okay, which is successful entrepreneurs generally have higher batting average of being successful again. So I can just keep backing them. But there are times you have to back first-time entrepreneur, let's say, right? Okay. So in those cases, I feel like they have a vision and they actually really meticulously design the trials well, either with the help of someone else, a CRO such as Parexel, or themselves, or surround themselves with talent that can actually really do a trial which is effective, and you don't have to repeat it. I mean, so many of the products in our industry have failed not because the product didn't work. Somebody else actually picked up and made it successful. Money was wasted because the trial was not designed properly. So those CEOs that actually have gotten to that place and done some successful trial, I feel like people gravitate towards and fund them. And there are multiple examples, and I am incredibly fortunate to be working with few such people.
That brings us to the close of this season of Clinical Trialblazers. I was impressed with the candor and transparency of our guests, their willingness to pay it forward for the next generation of biotech leaders, and their passion for the development of medicines that will benefit current and future patients. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to check out our other episodes where you can hear my full conversations with each of our guests. Please take a moment to rate and review this podcast wherever you listen. Clinical Trialblazers is created by Parexel Biotech and hosted by me, Alberto Grignolo. Our production partner is Wonder Media Network. Finally, a big thank you to every guest we had this season, and thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious and let's keep pushing the boundaries of clinical research.